In our last video, we saw how we could make a component-based JSF page with sticky top navigation so that content scrolls underneath it and it stays in place. And then a left side where we can maybe put either navigation or advertisements or maybe a drawer that comes out, something like that. And also some bottom text. In this video, we are going to see how we can make this easier for printing. Right now, if I hold Control and hit P, it'll give me a print preview, and it's basically going to show me that same page, but kind of with some funny styling. You see the color's not there, but it still reserves places for the left text. The top nav comes in some very strange area. So a few things we're going to need to do. First of all, let's go ahead and go into our template. And we notice that we have the top, left, content, and bottom sections. What we're going to do is we're going to turn off the top and the left when the user wants to print something. And so I'm going to go into our Styles CSS. I'm going to right-click and choose Copy. And I'm going to right-click again and choose Paste. And when I paste it, I'm going to paste it as print.css. Okay. Now in print CSS, I'm going to take the top and I'm going to say display : none, which effectively turns that off. Okay, I'm going to take the left and again I'm going to say display : none. For the content, I'm going to remove the top 3 EM, which basically left space for the top navigation. I'm going to say margin left. I'm going to take that away. We no longer have left nav. Margin bottom, we can take that away as well. And then the bottom, we'll do a display none on that because that's our privacy policy in terms of use. Okay, and I save. And now I'm going to go back to our template XHTML, and I already have a style sheet right here, my default style sheet. I'm going to clone that and paste, and I'm going to make a new entry for print. Now at the moment, these are two style sheets with the same selectors but different rules. So what we have to do is we have to give our page a little bit of instruction on when to use one style sheet versus another. It's not like these are additive because they both have the same selectors but different rules. They can't be used at the same time. They have to be used at different times. So we are going to use the media element of the link rel style sheet. One's going to be print, the other will be screen. So we'll say media equals screen, and then for the lower one we're going to say media equals print, and I'll save. Okay, now I'm going to go back and refresh our page. Let's see, we'll cancel out of this. We'll ensure that nothing's changed on this page. Okay, nothing has changed. Now I'm going to Control P. And you see now it's a little bit better. We have this thing here which we probably want to get rid of because that doesn't make a lot of sense. But you notice now we no longer are reserving space at the top. We're no longer reserving space at the left. Okay, it's printing nicely. There are, of course, some more things we can do to make it print nicely. We can go back to our print CSS, and for the content, why don't we say color, colon, and then white is all colors. So if I say pound FF, that means basically make the background white. But then I can also say, oh, I'm sorry, that should be background color, background dash color. And then I can say color, which would be our text color or any other color. We'll say pound 000000, which is black. You could probably also use the words white and black. I just happen to use the hex code for that. Save. And we'll go back and refresh, make sure that didn't change our content, which it did not. Okay, Control P. We shouldn't see any difference here because the default is black on white anyway. So we should still see the same, and sure enough, we do see the same text there. Okay, one more thing we can do is we can add a section to our template that only shows when we print. So let me go to my template here, and I'm going to add a new div, and we'll say div class equals print only. Okay. And then we'll have a closed div, and then we'll say p colon output label value equals printed from plantplaces.com. Something like that. Okay. And then we'll save. Now, the idea is that will only show up when we're printing it out. So notice I'm using a class, not an ID. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my print. Actually, no changes needed there. I need to go back and change my main style sheet. And I'm going to make a new selector. Remember, if it is an ID, we use a hash. If it is a class, we use a dot. So dot print only. That's what I called it, right? Yeah, print only. Okay, dot print only, and we're going to say display none. So that means if we're not in the print layout, then we do not want to display this print only section or anything at all that's marked with the class print only. So remember, a class means we can reuse it in multiple elements on one page, where an ID is a unique identifier that can only be used once. Either one we can style with CSS. We just use the hash for an ID and the dot for a class selector. That's all. So I save. I'll go back and take a look, and let's make sure if I cancel out of this and I refresh our page here again. Okay, so I've refreshed the page, and I'm going to search for printed, and you see printed does not appear on the look and feel we're going to see through a website. Control P to bring up a print preview. And we should see at the bottom, printed from plantplaces.com. So you see now we have a div that conditionally shows only if we're printing, does not show if we're displaying on the screen. So the media selector is one of the neat tricks that we can use in CSS. I've shown you print and screen. You see there are several other here that are available as well. One neat thing is that there's also a media rule that you can use in the CSS itself as an additional selector. So you see here we have at media screen and max width 300px. So you see that you can actually change which divs are available based on the width of the screen. Lots of neat combinations that you can do here, max width 500 and so on and so forth. So I will see this is one where we have link rel style sheet media max width 800. That one's pretty fancy, so you can change it as the user is resizing the browser as well. So change the style sheet that's in use. So if I go back to my page, let's say that we want to use that print style sheet, and maybe we'd want to modify it a bit, but we want to use that print style sheet if our max width is less than 500 pixels. I'll duplicate the style sheet line and Control M so we can see this in high def. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to say media equals and then parenthesis and then max dash width colon 800px. Okay, so use this print style sheet if our maximum width is no more than 800 pixels. Otherwise, use the traditional styles CSS. Let's see how this works. So I save, cancel, refresh my screen. Now let's resize the browser. Okay, and let me make it a little bit shorter. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to drag, and we'll make this a bit shorter. And notice as I make it shorter, the nav goes away. Now we're going to need to do a little cleaning up of the reservation it's made for the top and the left. But you see that the nav has disappeared because it's using now the print style sheet. So how do we get rid of that navigation on the top and the left? Well, we have to think like the browser is thinking, and it's confused here because we have provided it with a style sheet for screen and also a style sheet for max width 800. Now the rules of CSS say that if multiple style sheets apply and they have the same selector, that the last one that is included, the last one that is linked, is the one that wins. The reason why we still see that navigation set aside on the left and the top is, if we look in Styles CSS, that is setting aside 3EM for top, and then it's also setting aside, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one here. It's setting aside 3EM for top, and then it's also setting aside a margin left of 165 and a margin bottom of 85. I'm going to copy this because I know I'm going to need it in just a moment. If I go to print, notice that it's not overwriting those values with anything. Because it's not overwriting those values, the browser is going to inherit the values that were set in the Styles CSS, because it does see both CSS. So let me go ahead and paste all of the information from Styles to print for this content area. I'm going to get rid of a few things that are redundant, like padding, we already have that one. Position relative, we already have that one. So effectively what I've done now is I've added top, margin left, and margin bottom. Let me reset these guys to 0 EM. Margin, I guess we could give it 1 EM, give it a little bit of spacing. Margin left, let's just make it maybe 5 pixels. Margin bottom, again, maybe 5 pixels. As a matter of fact, to be consistent, we could go ahead and make the top 5 pixels as well. Okay, now you see what I'm doing is in the print CSS, I am manually overwriting the values in Styles CSS, so that when we do shrink the page, it's going to take a look and it's going to realize that it has both CSS to look at, but these values and the smaller width CSS are going to override the values in the screen CSS. So I save, and let's try that one more time. Okay, so here's our page, and notice it has the normal display values with the top and the left nav. I'm going to drag to shrink and take a look now. Now the left nav is gone, the top nav is gone, and more importantly, the space that we have reserved for that top and left nav is gone. This is a better use of real estate on a page that's going to be styled for a phone or something like that. This is an important trick to remember. Google recently announced that the way your web page looks on a phone is going to play significantly into how your search results rank for your website, where your website appears in search results. So early on, when you're designing a web page, think very seriously about implementing multiple style sheets as I've done here. And to be honest, it's a little dirty to do print for both of those styles that we have. You should really have a completely separate style sheet just for a minimum viewable space, for instance. But I hope that gives you some information on how to dynamically select an appropriate style sheet to give a web page a style that's appropriate for the content that it's going to be displaying. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how to use some of the Prime Faces themes to give our site a nice professional look. I look forward to seeing you then.